Seventh grade. It's Mr. Bath. Sorry I missed last week. My internet was not having a great time here in Heron, but at least you get to see 2 weeks of beard growth now instead of just the normal one. So um, it's hard to tame at this point, quite honestly. A few things before we get started. I'll try to keep this 10 minutes or less, but of course, I cannot make that promise. Report cards at the end of the year are going to be available online through Information Now on the school's website. You should all have your passwords. You got those in the first 9 weeks. If you need one mailed, like I sent on Remind on Monday, which I guess is yesterday. Who knows what day it is anymore, but you should have got it. You can message your homeroom teacher is probably the fastest way. But if you need to just message me, I can get the message to your homeroom teacher or just add you to the list. So feel free to message me if you or your parents or guardians need a mailed copy of your report card, and we'll be happy to send those out. So just let me know. The questions that go with the notes that I'm about to show you, or the notes that you're just going to click on. I know not as many of you are watching these videos anymore, which is fine. Like I said on our Google Meet last week, I'm just doing these to amuse myself mostly because, as you can see by the ceiling fan, that's I'm in the same place I am every day. I'm trapped, and I can either stare out the window or I can do these videos for a few of you. And so this is what I'm going to do because this is important to me anyway. But anyway, these questions that I'm going to assign are due Friday. The end of the grade period is Friday. And so anything that comes in after that, whether that is these questions or even late work, I can't put them in the grade book. So that if you want your grade bumped, you need to get these in by then. As we've said since the beginning, anything you're missing is not going to lower your grade. And if you don't do well in these aren't going to lower your grade. These only go in if they help your grade. And that goes for Chapter 9 stuff that was assigned through last week. If you want to do one of those today or tomorrow or Thursday or Friday, go ahead. That's fine. Well, I'll take them and grade them. Like I said, there's not, time has lost most of its meaning for me at this point. And so being able to grade these gives me something to do. And so I'm fine with doing that. So another Google Meet, if you want to do that, I will send a question out on Google Classroom and via Remind after I post these here in a few minutes. You can let me know if we want to do one next Monday or Tuesday or even Friday of this week. If you don't want to, that's fine. It's not going to hurt my feelings at all. But otherwise, we will give you the procedures coming up soon to get your stuff. If you're in my homeroom, I will be going to school on Thursday to gather your stuff out of your lockers, and I'll have them in bags for you with your name on them, and then we're going to put them out in the parking lot several feet apart so you can come grab those without putting yourself at risk of being around other people. You cannot just come into school and grab your stuff. You've got to follow that so that way we don't have a crowd of people, which is exactly literally the opposite of what we're going for. And so if you have any questions about that, let me know. I can't remember off the top of my head the date for the collection, but you should have got a reminder on that. If not, I will send that out pretty soon also. Otherwise, here we go. We're talking about basically the Industrial Revolution. During the colonial era, which is before what we talked about in the War of 1812 and the Jefferson era, basically before the Revolutionary War when they were colonies, which is why it's called the colonial era, we did not have enough workers. And so we had to develop tools that could do work faster for us. And so people work in their homes, make cloth and other goods. And there were the idea of like factories and stores existed. But mostly people just made their own stuff. Maybe you would sell to your neighbors. But like I said, there were factories, there were stores. But the idea of just like, hey, we're going to head down to Walmart and grab something was not part of the culture, part of the civilization, part of life, because we could not produce things in a mass production style widely enough to be able to sustain that type of economy. Things begin to change in the mid-1700s in Great Britain first. They start developing machines that, and you've seen these before, the factories that are on streams or rivers, and they have these big they look like Ferris wheels that the water comes through, and there's like buckets, and they turn them around, and then when the water comes over the top, it dumps out, and the stream, the current picks it up, turns around, and those were attached to a piston and a rod that would turn the machinery inside. And And so people would have to build their factories on moving waterways. And so this really takes off in Britain in the mid to late 1700s. Britain doesn't want this to spread. They want to, hey, let's make our money for us. And so they prohibit people from leaving Britain with plans to create factories in specifically America, because they're still a little sore about the Revolutionary War and stuff, but anywhere basically. And so what people started to do is they would work in factories for their bosses, and they would memorize these blueprints and be like, oh, I just got to go visit my family, bye. And then they would have these blueprints memorized, and they would be able to come over here and create their factory. New England was the ideal place for lots of reasons. Number one, you can't farm really well there because the soil is rocky and there's not enough nutrients, but there are also a boatload of waterways there. And so they had lumber, they had waterways, they had minerals under the ground. They just didn't have vitamins for plants. And so when it came time to create factories, this was literally in America, the ideal location. In Georgia, they could grow crops and cotton or whatever. But in New England, growing things was tough. They were all subsistence farmers, which basically just meant growing enough so we can not die, not to sell. And so now people are, having a way that they're able to make money. So they're also on ports. They could ship their stuff. They're close to coal and iron. They can receive cotton, and they can ship the finished shirts or chairs or whatever. Obviously, you don't make a chair out of cotton, but lumber, same thing. Back to where you go. So we have these ports. Again, the word shipping, when you're on Amazon Prime, you get 2-day shipping. The word shipping comes from the fact that things always had to be by boats before we had airplanes and helicopters and semi-trucks and roads and the internal combustion engine and everything else. And so new technologies begin to crop up everywhere. The spinning jenny basically used to have to take strands of cotton and twist them until they became threads. You still do, but now we've got machines such as the spinning jenny, the power loom, and the water frame that were taking that process and automating it and having machines that could do that for us. The most famous, of course, is the cotton gin. If you've ever held a piece of raw cotton, now the word raw sounds weird because you're not eating it, obviously. If you do, you've got, the quarantine's got us all doing some weird things, but you shouldn't be eating cotton balls. But if you pick one off of the plant, they're very dense, they're very heavy, and they're full of thorns. And so in order to be able to use that as thread, you had to pick the thorns out by hand before Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin. And it would take one person. And when I say person, at this point in American history, what we're saying is slaves. It would take one slave a day to pick one bushel of cotton. And so it was in a lot of ways more trouble than it was worth. And cotton was just a very niche crop grown in just certain places. But the cotton gin is basically a machine with a belt that would pull things through, basically a teethed comb that would remove the seeds from there. And one person can now do 50 bushels a day. And so this created what we call king cotton in the South. And, the law of unintended consequences. Eli Whitney was just trying to make an invention to make things easier and to make money. Slavery was on the decline before the cotton gin, and this really made it re-explode because now cotton was everywhere in the South because you could grow 50 times more and have it be processed. And so people were making money hand over fist. And slavery, again, the population, the number of slaves, the slave trade, selling children to other families across state lines, etc., all reemerged because of the cotton gin, which again was not necessarily Eli Whitney's intent. But things happen that we don't always intend when we, do things. And so this has had a lot of financially positive effects on America if you were a rich person and if you were a white person, and especially if you were some combination thereof. But for the poor sharecroppers and especially slaves, this created a lot of strife, a lot of problems, a lot of issues, and a lot of suffering. And so Samuel Slater, again, he's one of the guys that we were talking about that snuck plans over here. Eli Whitney also created interchangeable parts, which is the idea that basically before, if there was a machine and a part broke, they would go in and measure it and create a new part. And what he did is basically say like, hey, every machine should use all the same size parts. So that way, if the if the heating coil in my oven over there breaks, I can order online or I can go to the store and order a new heating coil that will fit in that oven. Whereas before they were just like, well, we just got to build a new one. Well, he had the idea of like, hey, if we could just have things on the ready to just insert into the broken machine and fix it, this could save us millions of man hours. And of course it did. And so this paved the way later on for Henry Ford to do the assembly line and everything else. People are still mostly farmers. But again, this is really changing the American economy. We've got factories coming in, and we've got industry, especially in the North. And this really set a divide between the North and the South, between factory work and farm work. And again, the explosion of cotton really increased the demand for slaves in the South. And of course, this is just another another bump on the road towards the Civil War, and the ball is really rolling downhill now. And so anyway, this is the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Things are starting to, turn into factories more. Corporations needed banking, and so we created a second bank in the United States, which again created another argument. The Constitution doesn't say we can do this. Well, the Constitution doesn't say we can't do this. And so it was another argument. Of course, they ended up creating it. And basically, throughout American history, anytime there's been an argument about whether or not we can do it, we just do it anyway. Cities began to grow. America was largely a rural nation before the Industrial Revolution, but now you start having people move in large numbers into larger cities. Boston, New York, and Philadelphia are already there, but of course, St. Louis took off in our area. And, you could think of hundreds of other examples of cities around America. So that's it for today. I'm closer to 12 minutes than 10, but that's pretty much par for the course. If you stuck around, thanks. If you didn't, please get these answers from the notes that I'll attach to this also. And you're not hearing me talk anyway, so I don't know why I'm saying that. But anyway, have a good rest of the week, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.